My name is David, and for 4 years, I worked security on the night shift at a medium-sized hospital just outside Columbus, Ohio. I used to think the scariest part of the job would be the emergency room fights or the occasional drunk who did not want to stay in his bed. I was wrong. The thing that stuck with me did not bleed and did not argue. It pushed a call button. Our hospital had an old wing on the 4th floor that everyone called the West Wing, even though the sign out front had a different name. The West Wing had been closed for almost a year by the time this started. Too old, too expensive to bring up to new codes, so they shut the whole section down. They left a few rooms for storage, turned off the lights, and locked the double doors at the end of the main hallway. My rounds were pretty basic. Start in the lobby, walk through the emergency room, check the loading dock, ride the elevator up each floor, scan my badge at a few checkpoints, make sure nobody was wandering where they were not supposed to be. I did that 3 or 4 times a night. It was boring, which I liked. The first time something happened, it was about 2:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. I remember the exact time because I wrote it down later. I was at the security desk watching the cameras when the nurse at the main desk on the 3rd floor called me. "Hey David, can you come up here a second? The panel is acting weird." The call light panel is this long strip of little red and green bulbs that tell the nurses which patient room is buzzing for help. When I got to the 3rd floor, she pointed up at the panel. One red light was on. Room 409. That would not be strange, except for the fact that 409 was in the closed West Wing. "You sure no one is in there?" I asked. "Nobody is supposed to be," she said. "Engineering said they cut power to those rooms. The light keeps blinking on and off. It is freaking Julie out." Julie, the other nurse on duty, was pretending not to listen, but I could see her eyes on that panel every few seconds. I tried to play it off. Probably some bad wiring or something. "I will go up and check the door. If the wing is still locked, you can call maintenance in the morning." I took the elevator to 4. When the doors opened, the 4th floor looked like it always did that late. The main hallway lights were dim, and most of the room doors were closed. The West Wing doors sat at the end of the hall with a yellow sign that said "Authorized staff only." The keypad next to the doors blinked green when I swiped my badge. That part was normal. I pushed the bar and stepped inside. The difference hit me right away. The air felt colder in there, and it had a stale smell that reminded me of an attic. One string of emergency lights ran down the ceiling, just enough to see shapes of beds and equipment through the glass windows in each room. I walked past 401, 403, 405, all empty, no sound except my shoes on the floor. When I got to 409, I stopped. The door was half open. I was sure facilities kept all the doors closed in this wing. I pushed it open with my knuckles. Inside, the bed stood in the center of the room, with plastic wrap still around the mattress. The bedside monitor was off. A rolling tray sat against the wall. The window blinds were closed. There was nobody in there. Just to be thorough, I checked the bathroom, then looked under the bed. Empty. On the wall by the door was the call button panel. The little red nurse symbol was not lit. I pressed it, and it lit up, then went dark again like it should. On my way back out, I tried to ignore the feeling that someone was behind me. It was that heavy pressure on the back of your neck that makes you want to walk faster without knowing why. I did not run. I did not want the cameras to catch me running from an empty room. When I got back to the 3rd floor, the light for 409 on the nurse panel had gone dark. "See?" I said. "Probably just a glitch." The nurse, whose badge said Carol, did not look convinced. "It blinked on for 5 minutes straight," she said. "Soon as you went in there, it stopped." I shrugged and went back downstairs. For a week, nothing else happened. I told myself it was an old circuit that still had some juice, even though that did not make much sense. Then the call light came on again. This time it was just after 3 in the morning. I was at the desk watching an old cop show when I heard it. Not the phone, the actual chime from our own call system. The sound played at every nurse station and at the security desk. I looked at the panel on my wall. Room 409 was red again. I picked up the phone and called the 3rd floor right away. "Yeah, we see it," Carol said. She sounded annoyed and scared at the same time. "No other rooms?" Just that one. Nobody is near the panel. Can you please check it again? End quote. So I did the whole route. Elevator up, long hallway, swipe at the west wing, cold air. Only this time, when I stepped through the double doors, I heard something. A soft ding like the kind you hear when one of the old ceiling televisions is turned on. Then a tiny crackle, almost like speaker static. It came from down the hall, near 409. I told myself it was another emergency light warming up. I walked faster. The door to 409 was closed now. I grabbed the handle and pushed. The room looked the same as before. Wrapped mattress, blank monitor, blinds drawn. But there was one new thing. Someone had pulled the bed down flat, and the blanket which had been folded at the foot of the mattress was now spread out, smoothed, like a patient had just been tucked in. There was a shallow dent on the right side of the bed, the kind you get from the weight of a person. I tried not to stare at it. I walked straight to the call panel, pressed the button, watched the red light turn off again, then backed out of the room. On my way back to the third floor, Carol met me halfway down the main hall. "Well?" she asked. "Nobody there," I said. "But your light should be off." She chewed her lip. "You are not the first one to say that." "What do you mean?" "There used to be a guy in that room," she said. "Couple years back. Long stay. Lung cancer. He hit his call button all night, every night, even when someone was sitting right there. After he died, the panel in that spot glitched for months. Engineering rewired it twice. Maybe they missed something," I said. She shook her head like she wanted to say more, but changed her mind. "Just be careful up there," she said. Over the next month, 409 called in 3 more times, always between 2 and 4, always when the floors were quiet and the halls were almost empty. Every time I went up, the west wing door would unlock, the room would be empty, and the call panel would reset itself as soon as I stepped through the doorway. The third time I noticed the dent in the bed was deeper. The fourth time the bedside monitor was on, the screen showed a flat green line with a heart rate number in the top corner, 32. I called engineering the next morning and asked if someone had been working in that room. The guy on the phone laughed. "West wing is dark," he said. "We cut power to those outlets months ago. No point throwing money at it until they decide what to do up there." "What about the call system?" I asked. "Panel is still live," he said. "We did not want to tear into the walls. But if nobody is in that room, nobody should be hitting that button." The more I told myself it was some old relay, the less I believed it. There was a pattern. The calls only came when the floor was quiet, when there were no rapid responses, when the nurses were sitting with charts and coffee, when there was time for someone to answer. One night in January, we had a bad snowstorm. 2 nurses called off. 1 doctor stayed home and did teleconsults. The hospital was not busy, but the staff who made it in were stretched thin. Around 1:30, I made my first full round. By the time I finished and got back to the security office, it was almost 2. I had just sat down when the call chime went off. I knew which room it was before I looked. The panel flashed 409 inches bright red numbers. I picked up the phone. The third floor line was busy. Someone else was using it. I watched the panel. The light stayed on. I told myself to let it go. It was an empty room in a closed wing. If it was a real glitch, it could wait until morning. But my stomach was tight, and my palms were sweating, and I could not sit there and listen to that quiet repeating chime. So I grabbed my flashlight and my radio and headed for the elevator. The hospital seemed even more silent than usual. Snow pressed against the windows. The parking lot lights were blurred white. When the elevator doors opened on 4, the hallway was empty. I walked down to the west wing, swiped my badge. The light on the keypad flickered 3 times before turning green. I had never seen it do that before. On the other side of the doors, the air was freezing. My breath actually showed. I clicked on my flashlight even though the emergency lights were on. Halfway down the hall, I stopped. The door to 409 was wide open. From inside the room came a low, steady sound. Beep, beep, beep. I knew that sound. Cardiac monitor. But it was slower than normal, like it was struggling to keep a rhythm. I stepped into the doorway and aimed my light at the bed. The mattress was no longer wrapped in plastic. Sheets were spread out. The blanket was pulled up neatly. The bed was occupied. At least, that is what it looked like. I could not see anyone clearly, but the blanket rose in a clear shape, the shape of a body lying on its back, arms at its sides. The pillow was pressed down. The monitor beside the bed glowed faint green. The heart rate number was 27. My fingers went numb. "Sir," I said before I even thought about it. My voice sounded too loud in the cold air. "Sir, are you supposed to be in here?" The beeping did not change. No one answered. Part of me wanted to rip the blanket back and prove to myself it was a pile of supplies or a trick of the light. The other part of me was sure that if I touched that blanket, I would feel skin underneath. I took one step closer, then another. As I got near the side of the bed, the shape under the covers shifted. The blanket rose at the chest, like someone was slowly taking a deep breath. I stopped moving. Every hair on my arm stood up. The call button on the wall lit bright red. I heard the faintest rasp, like dry lips trying to form words. It came from the bed. The only thing I could make out was a single word. It sounded like, "Please." That broke whatever courage I had. I backed out of the room without turning my back, and then turned and walked fast down the hall. When I reached the double doors, I did run. I crashed into the elevator and jammed the button for 3. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, Carol was standing by the nurse station with the phone in her hand. "Did you just go up there?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. My mouth felt like chalk. "The panel cleared the second you hit the floor," she said. "I tried to call you, but your radio was all static." I unclipped the radio and raised it to my ear. It was fine now. No static at all. I did not tell her what I saw. I just said the room was empty again, and maybe we should get someone from engineering to yank the wires out in the morning. She nodded like she knew I was lying but did not want to know the details. I went back to the security office and watched the camera for the 4th floor for almost an hour. The feed was grainy, but clear enough to see the hallway to the West Wing. At about 3:15, the motion detector in that hall triggered, and the little timestamp turned yellow. On screen, the double doors to the West Wing opened a few inches, then stopped. No one came through. The doors hung open like that for a full minute, then drifted shut. That was the last time 409 called in. I worked at that hospital for another year and a half. The West Wing stayed closed. The new administration eventually tore it out completely and rebuilt that whole side of the floor. Shiny new rooms, wider halls, bright paint. The first night they reopened it, Carol called me from the new nurse station. Her voice sounded forced. "You will never guess what room number they gave the corner suite," she said. I did not have to guess. 409. That night the panel stayed quiet. It has stayed quiet ever since, as far as I know. I left the hospital job a year later for a warehouse gig that pays better and does not involve walking around dark buildings at 3 in the morning. Sometimes, though, when I wake up at night to use the bathroom, I catch myself listening for a faint electronic chime. I imagine a red light coming on above a doorway, and a patient who does not know he is gone, pressing a button for help that never comes. I still remember the way that blanket rose like someone taking one last breath. And when I think about it for too long, I feel that same cold air on my neck, and I start to wonder if answering that call was the only reason it finally stopped. My name is Mark, and before last year I would have laughed if you told me ghosts were real. I grew up thinking anything like that could be explained by bad wiring or a drafty window. Now I sleep with every light on in the hallway, and I will not have another baby monitor in my house ever again. All of this started when my wife Emily and I moved into a small rental house in a quiet neighborhood in Indiana. We had just brought our son Jacob home from the hospital. He was 2 weeks old when we signed the lease. The house was not perfect, but it was cheap and it was available, and we were exhausted and desperate. The landlord, a man named Robert, met us there with a folder of papers and a smile that never reached his eyes. "Good bones," he said, patting the porch railing. "Previous tenant was here a long time. Little older, quiet type. She passed away in the hospital last year. Place has been empty since." Emily shot me a quick look. I shrugged. People die. It did not mean the house was cursed. We spent the first week buried in cardboard boxes and baby blankets. The nursery was the smallest bedroom at the end of the hall. There was just enough space for a crib, a small dresser, and an old rocking chair that came with the house. The chair sat in the corner by the window. The first time I sat in it, the wood creaked, and the whole thing rocked forward and back in a slow, smooth way, like someone had used it every day for years. Emily's sister gave us a baby monitor as a gift. There were two parts: a small white transmitter we clipped to the side of the crib, and a handheld receiver that stayed with us in whatever room we were in. It had a row of green lights that glowed when it picked up sound, and a little red one that flashed if the battery was low. It was audio only. No video, no fancy app, nothing special. The first couple of nights we slept in shifts. One of us would doze on the couch, while the other tried to get Jacob to sleep. I remember sitting at the kitchen table at 2 a.m. with the baby monitor on the table next to my coffee, listening to Jacob's tiny breaths through the speaker. It made me feel safer. The first strange thing that happened felt so small that I almost forgot it later. It was maybe a month after we moved in. Emily had finally talked me into going back to the gym for an hour after work. She stayed home with Jacob. When I got back, the house was very quiet. The lights in the living room were off, and the only light came from the hallway nightlight. I found Emily in our bedroom, lying on top of the covers. Jacob was asleep in his crib down the hall. The baby monitor sat on her nightstand. It was on, volume low. "You okay?" I asked. She opened her eyes and stared at the monitor like she was not sure what she had heard. "Did you leave the radio on in his room?" she asked. "We do not even have a radio," I said. She frowned and pointed at the monitor. "I was lying here and I heard singing through this thing, like an old song, a lullaby or something, a woman's voice. It was clear. I thought you came home and were trying to be sweet and weird, but the driveway was empty. Maybe it picked up another monitor down the street," I said. "They can cross signals, right?" "Maybe," she said, but she did not sound convinced. We went down the hall and checked the nursery. Jacob was asleep, one tiny fist pressed to his cheek. The room was still. No radio, no music box. The window was shut. I told myself it was interference. Old houses and cheap electronics do strange things. 2 nights later, I heard it too. It was around 3 a.m. Emily was finally asleep in our bed. I was on the couch with the monitor on the coffee table. The volume was higher than before because I was afraid I would fall asleep and miss Jacob if he cried. For a long stretch, there was only static and his soft breathing. Then, so faint, I thought I was imagining it. A voice came through, a woman's voice, soft, close to the mic. "Hush now. Time for sleep." The hairs on my arms rose. I picked up the monitor and held it against my ear. "Lily," the voice whispered. "Sweet girl, time to close your eyes." My first thought was that someone had hacked into a baby monitor somewhere else, that I was listening to a stranger in another house. That is what I told myself as I walked down the hall to the nursery, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The door to Jacob's room was half open. The nightlight on the dresser cast a dim yellow glow. Jacob was awake, lying on his back and staring at the corner by the window. His eyes were wide, and he was smiling at something I could not see. The rocking chair in that corner was moving, back and forth, very slowly. There was no one in the chair. I went straight to the crib and looked down at my son. His little hands waved in the air. I could hear the monitor against my chest, still picking up room noise. There was no voice now, just my own breathing. The window was shut. The air felt normal. Still, I unplugged the monitor transmitter from the wall and carried it and the receiver out of the room. I left the nursery door fully open so I could see Jacob from the hallway. Emily woke up when I came into the bedroom and saw my face. "What is wrong?" I felt stupid saying it out loud, so I did not tell her everything. I told her the monitor was acting up and I heard some weird interference and it freaked me out. I did not mention the rocking chair. The next day, I bought a new brand of baby monitor at the store. This one had a small camera that clipped to the crib and a screen we could carry around. I threw the old audio monitor into a box in the closet. The video monitor made me feel better at first. The picture was grainy, black and white at night, but we could see Jacob breathing and know he was okay. We could zoom in a little if we wanted, tilt the angle. For about a week, there was nothing strange. No singing, no random voices. Then one night, I woke up around 2 and checked the screen on the nightstand. I do not know why I woke up. Jacob was not crying. The house was quiet. On the screen, I could see his crib, the slats in soft gray lines, his little body a darker shape in the middle. The timestamp in the corner said 2:14. At the edge of the picture was the rocking chair. It sat still in the corner by the window. As I watched, the chair moved, just a little, forward an inch, back an inch, like someone had shifted their weight in it. There was no sound. I squinted and leaned closer to the screen. The picture shimmered for a second, like there was a sudden wave of static, and in that shimmer, I thought I saw a shape sitting in the chair, a darker patch against the darker corner, a suggestion of a shoulder, maybe a head bent over. Then the image snapped back to normal and the chair was empty again. I got up, went down the hall, and opened the nursery door. The rocking chair was motionless. Jacob was sleeping peacefully. The air felt heavy, like a room that had just been cried in, but there was no one there. Emily got mad when I told her about the chair. "We are exhausted, and you are seeing things," she said. "We both are." The singing was probably a neighbor. The chair moved because the floor is uneven. Uneven floors do not make a chair start and stop by themselves, I said. We argued in whispers while Jacob slept. In the end, she said, if I kept bringing it up, she was going to stay at her mother's house for a while, and I backed off. For a few days, I tried to ignore the monitor. I still used it, but I avoided staring at the screen too long. When I got home from work, I left it on the kitchen counter and told myself I would only pick it up if Jacob cried. One evening, the doorbell rang just as I was changing a diaper. Emily called for me from the front of the house, but I was elbow deep in wipes and baby powder, so she answered it. A few minutes later, she brought a woman into the nursery. The woman was in her late 50s, with dark hair going gray and a tired face. "Mark, this is Paula from next door," Emily said. She brought cookies. Paula smiled at Jacob and then glanced at the rocking chair. Her smile faded. "Robert rented this place out again," she said softly. "I was wondering when someone would move in." "Do you know the previous tenant?" I asked. Paula nodded. Her name was Margaret. She lived here a long time, kept to herself mostly. She used to babysit my Lily when she was little. That was years ago. Emily and I both noticed the name. "Lily," Emily said, "that is your daughter." Paula looked down at her hands. "She passed," she said. She did not give a date, and we did not ask. Asthma attack. It happened fast. We were at the grocery store. Margaret was watching her. She loved that rocking chair. Used to sit there with Lily for hours, reading stories, singing. I can still hear it when it is quiet. Her voice. She would sing that old Shaker song. I do not know the name, just the tune. She hummed a few bars, and my stomach flipped. It was the same melody I had heard through the monitor that first night. After Paula left, I went into the closet and dug out the old audio monitor. I did not tell Emily. I waited until she and Jacob were both asleep, and then I plugged the old transmitter back in, next to the video camera. I took the receiver out to the kitchen, turned the volume up, and set my phone to record next to it. If it was interference, I wanted proof. If it was something else, I needed to know that too. For almost an hour, there was nothing but the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional rustle from Jacob turning in his sleep. I made coffee and sat at the table in the dark. Then the green lights on the monitor lit up all at once. The speaker hissed, then cleared. "Hush," the woman's voice said. "Hush now. It is all right. Margaret is here." She sounded closer than before, like she was standing right next to the crib. There was a pause, then a little laugh. A child's laugh. Light and quick. It was not Jacob. It was a little girl. "Do you see him?" the woman murmured. "Our new baby. Sweet boy. Go on, Lily. Say hello." Every part of me wanted to run down that hall and grab my son, but I stayed in my chair because I was afraid that if I moved, the voice would stop and I would doubt myself again. The girl's laugh came again, a little louder. Then the woman began humming the same lullaby Paula had hummed in our kitchen. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. My breath came in sharp little clouds. I hit stop on my phone and replayed the audio I had just recorded. I heard my chair creak. I heard the clock. I heard Jacob's faint breathing. I heard my own heartbeat in the background. I did not hear the voice. The monitor was still humming softly with that distant song, but it was not on the recording. That was the moment I believed this was not some radio signal. Something was in that room with my kid, and it only existed in the space between the transmitter and receiver. 2 nights later, everything came to a head. I was working a late shift at the warehouse. Emily was home with Jacob. I kept my phone on me and checked it during breaks, just in case she texted. That night, I also had the video monitor app running in the background. The newer monitor connected to my phone through the house Wi-Fi. Around 10:30, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. When I pulled it out, there was a notification from the monitor app. Motion detected. I tapped it, and the live picture from the nursery filled the screen. Jacob was in his crib, asleep on his back. The room looked normal, except for one thing. The rocking chair was moving again. A slow, steady motion. Forward, back, forward, back. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Emily. "Are you watching the monitor?" I typed back right away. "Yes." "Do you see the chair?" She replied almost instantly. "I hear someone talking upstairs. Mark, I swear someone is in the house." My mouth went dry. I looked at the live feed again. The camera view shifted slightly, like someone had just brushed past it. The chair kept rocking. On the edge of the frame, just for a second, a shape leaned over the crib. A darker outline against the gray. The curve of a head, hair hanging down. It blurred before I could really focus on it. And then there was nothing there. "Call 911, I texted. "Get Jacob. Get out of the house now." I grabbed my supervisor, told him there was an emergency, and ran for my truck. While I drove, I tried to call Emily. The first call went straight to voicemail. The second rang once and cut off. The 10-minute drive felt like an hour. When I turned onto our street, I saw flashing blue lights in front of the house. 2 police cars. Emily stood on the sidewalk wrapped in a blanket. Jacob was in her arms, screaming. One of the officers was talking into his radio. The front door of the house was open. I ran up to Emily and grabbed her shoulder. "Are you okay?" She was shaking. "I heard her," she said. "A woman, right next to his crib. I went up to get him and the chair was rocking and I heard her. She said, 'Do not take her yet. She is not ready.'" Then Jacob started crying and the monitor just went dead. The police searched the house from top to bottom. Every closet, every corner, under every bed. No sign of forced entry. No strange cars on the street. No footprints in the snow except ours. One of the officers, an older guy with gray at his temples, pulled me aside in the kitchen. "You said your monitor picked up someone in the room," he said. "You get a good look at them." "Not really," I said. "Just a shape, a woman, sitting in the rocking chair, leaning over the crib." He glanced toward the hallway. "This house has had a few calls," he said quietly. "Noise complaints from the neighbors when it was empty. People swearing they heard voices from inside. Robert never said much about it. You might want to ask him again about the history here." We did not stay the night. We packed a couple bags and went to Emily's mother's house across town. Jacob slept in a portable crib by the bed. No monitors. The next day I called Robert and told him we were breaking the lease. I did not give a reason. After a long silence, he sighed. "You are not the first," he said. "After Margaret died, I tried renting it to a young couple. They left after 2 months. Said the place was messing with their baby. I thought they were just nervous new parents. Guess I was wrong. We found a new apartment within a week. It was smaller, more expensive, and on a noisy street, but I did not care. I wanted people above us and below us, and on both sides. I wanted thin walls and city lights. We threw away both baby monitors when we moved. Emily took them out to the dumpster herself. She did not even want them in the trash can inside the kitchen. For a while, things were normal. No voices, no rocking chairs. Jacob slept better. We slept better. Life settled into the tired rhythm of new parenthood. About a month after we moved, I was at work on my lunch break, scrolling through my phone. I do not know why I did it. Habit, maybe? I opened the old baby monitor app, the one that connected to the camera back at the house on Maple Street. I had never deleted it. I figured the camera was unplugged and the account inactive. The app loaded. For a moment, it showed a black screen where the feed should be. Then, to my surprise, the image changed. The picture was grainy and crooked, but I recognized the room right away. The nursery at the old house. Same crib, same window, same rocking chair. The crib was empty. The chair was moving slowly. Forward, back. The audio icon was lit. I turned the volume up. There was static, then a soft voice. "Hush now," the woman said. "Margaret is here. Do not cry, Lily. We will see him again soon." I stared at the screen, at that empty crib in the house we no longer lived in, and watched the chair rock all by itself. I deleted the app. I deleted my account. I changed my email and threw my phone away a week later when the battery started dying faster than it should have. I know that sounds paranoid, but I could not stand the thought of that camera still sending something out into the dark, trying to reach us. We do not talk about the old house anymore. If the subject comes up, Emily shuts down and changes it. Jacob is too young to remember any of it. Sometimes at night when he cries, I stand outside his bedroom door and listen before I go in. I listen for another voice under his, a low, patient voice, singing through the wall. So far, I have not heard it again. But every now and then, when I am alone in the dark, I swear I can feel that same cold air on my neck, and I imagine a woman sitting in a rocking chair somewhere, holding a child that is not there, waiting for another baby to move in. Most nights at the software company were harmless, quiet, predictable. That is why I volunteered for the late shift every time. I liked being the only one on the fourth floor after dark. No meetings, no chatter, no phones ringing, just the low hum of servers through the wall and the glow of my 2 monitors. On the night that changed everything, the building felt different as soon as the last elevator dinged and the day crew left. Usually the silence felt relaxing, but that night it settled over the cubicles like a weight. Even the server hum seemed quieter than usual, muffled somehow, like the walls were absorbing sound instead of reflecting it. By 11, the parking lot outside had emptied except for my car and the old black sedan that belonged to the building's overnight maintenance guy. I had only seen him twice, and both times he kept his eyes on the floor, muttering to himself. I never learned his name. I put my headphones on and dove into a block of code that needed debugging. At some point, I must have gotten too focused, because when the office lights flickered, I jumped like someone had tapped me on the shoulder. They flickered again a moment later. Not a full outage, just a quick dip in brightness, like something heavy had drawn too much power. I took my headphones off and listened. Nothing. The entire floor was dead silent. Not the usual soft creaks of the ventilation system, not the faint echo of the cleaning crew on the lower floors. Nothing. Then, from somewhere near the stairwell at the far end of the hall, I heard a single footstep, a slow, heavy one. At first, I assumed it was maintenance. Maybe the guy had come up to check something. But the step did not sound like a boot. It sounded like a regular dress shoe, the kind office workers wore. I waited for another step. It did not come. After a minute, I forced myself to laugh under my breath. One noise on a quiet night in a huge building is not enough to get paranoid over. The AC kicks on. Things settle. Walls pop. That is what happens in old office towers. I went back to work. About 20 minutes later, I heard the footstep again. Only this time, it was closer. Not right behind me, but close enough that I could tell it was on the carpeted part of the hallway, not the tile near the elevator. I stood up and leaned over the wall of my cubicle. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. Every row of cubicles sat still and empty, glowing a sickly yellow from the desk lamps left behind by coworkers. "Hello?" My voice came out tighter than I expected. No answer. I walked to the corner, peeked around it, and looked down the main aisle. Nothing but the usual maze of beige dividers and abandoned coffee mugs. I checked the break room, the conference room, the copy room, all empty. When I got back to my desk, I found something that made my stomach drop. My task chair, my big adjustable black office chair, was pulled away from my desk. Not by much, maybe 4 inches. But I had not moved it, and I always pushed it in, partly because the cubicles were cramped, and partly because I liked order. The wheels left faint tracks in the carpet. I stood there staring at them longer than I should have. Then, without warning, a soft click sounded behind me. I spun around. It came from the glass door leading to the small executive office row. Those offices were usually locked at night. Only managers had keys, and none of them were here. We were required to check the door before the night shift started. I had checked it at 9. It had been locked. Now it was slightly open, just enough for a line of darkness to show down the middle. The air suddenly felt too cold. Not like the AC turned on, more like the temperature dropped in the same spot where the door had opened. I took a step toward it. The carpet felt soft and too quiet under my shoes. Is someone in there? Again, no answer. I pushed the door the rest of the way open. The hinge gave a faint groan. Inside were 3 offices, all dark. I flicked the light switch. The fluorescent fixtures blinked once, twice, then stayed off. Dead bulbs. I used my phone flashlight instead. The beam cut across empty desks, dead monitors, a stack of banker boxes. Everything looked normal except for one thing. In the second office, the tall leather chair behind the desk was turned slightly, not facing the computer, but angled toward the doorway, like whoever had been sitting in it had just gotten up. I backed out and let the door close. By midnight, I had convinced myself to stop checking every sound. I put my headphones back on, but left one ear uncovered. I drank bad vending machine coffee. I tried to pretend nothing was wrong. Then the text messages started. They were coming from the office landline number. At first, I thought it was some glitch with the messaging system we use to send internal announcements. But when I opened the first message, my entire body went cold. It said, "Are you still here?" I stared at it for a full minute. Then, another message arrived. "Come to the stairwell." I looked at the little clock on my monitor. 12:37 a.m. I typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. I muted my phone and left it on my desk. I was not going to the stairwell. I was going nowhere near there. If someone was messing with me, they could get a good laugh in the morning when security reviewed the logs. That is when I noticed the sound. Breathing, not mine, directly behind my chair. Slow, steady, too close. The kind of breathing you hear when someone is standing inches from the back of your neck. I froze. I could not even turn my head. The air behind me felt thick, like someone was blocking the vents. The breathing continued, soft and deliberate. I do not know how long I stood there before I finally forced myself to turn around. No one was behind me. The space was empty. My chair sat perfectly still. That was scarier than seeing someone. I grabbed my backpack and decided the night shift was over. I walked toward the elevator as fast as I could without sprinting. As I passed the stairwell door, something hit the other side of it. Hard. One loud smack, like a fist or a shoulder slamming into the metal. Then another. Then another. A rhythmic pounding, growing faster. I backed away until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. My breath came out in shaky bursts. The pounding stopped as suddenly as it started. Silence. Then the handle of the stairwell door began to turn. Slow. Precise. Someone was on the other side trying to open it. I ran. All the way to the elevator. I jabbed the button over and over. When the doors slid open, I practically fell inside. As the elevator descended, the lights flickered again. In the brief flicker, I saw something behind me in the mirrored wall. A figure. Not detailed. Not solid. Just a suggestion of a person standing too close. When the lights returned to normal, the reflection was gone. I walked out of that building and did not look back. In the parking lot, the cold night air felt like a blessing. I got into my car and locked the doors before I even turned the engine on. I drove home shaking so hard, I had to pull over once to catch my breath. The next day, I called my boss and told him I could not work late shifts anymore. I expected him to argue or ask questions. Instead, he sounded strangely relieved. "You are not the first," he said quietly. "A few months ago, one of our analysts refused to come back after a late shift. Said he heard someone walking the halls behind him. Security checked the cameras, but most of that floor goes dead after 11. Cameras freeze. We keep putting in work orders, but nothing sticks." I quit 2 weeks later. I drive past the building sometimes on the way to the grocery store. The fourth-floor lights are off and on even when the parking lot is empty. My friends say it is janitorial staff, or timers, or faulty wiring. Maybe they are right. But sometimes when I stop at the red light nearby and stare at those glowing windows, I get the unmistakable feeling that someone up there is staring back, waiting for the next person willing to stay late, waiting for someone who thinks they are alone.